side. This is an incoming tide. This is a floodgate across a bay-like structure with an incoming tide, and you can see the impact of the floodgate on the incoming tide. I'll talk more about that as we go forward. So Galveston Bay Foundation, I won't talk too much about us, just our mission is to preserve and protect Galveston Bay. We do a lot of different things. We work with Exploration Green, we work on the Galveston Bay Report Card with the Houston Advanced Research Center, but we certainly have an advocacy role as well. We take positions on certain things. We get involved in discussion, generating discussion. We've tried to be involved in the discussion about coastal storm surge from the beginning. In fact, Dr. Merrill from Texas A&M, who's not here, but he's a colleague of Colonel Waterworth, sat down in my office in January of 2009 to kind of pitch the idea of an Ike Dike and wanted to see what I thought about it. And we've been really talking about it ever since. So what is our vision as an organization for Galveston Bay? This is kind of nice language, envision a future Galveston Bay that is brimming with vitality, connected to the people, and contributing to the community in every way. And we do a lot of different things to try to make that happen. So just getting right into storm surge, because time is short tonight. We've got a region of 5 or 6 million people. Many of us live really close to the coast. We moved to the coast. We understood that there would be hurricanes. We understood there was a risk in moving to the coast. But we have a lot of really important infrastructure on the coast. Through a variety of reasons, we've got all this infrastructure, oil and gas refining, petrochemical. And so that really, in my mind, is the original driver of protecting the coast, protecting our infrastructure. We've got Houston Ship Channel. You see a picture right there. Tons and tons of different industry up there. It's there because it needs to be near the water, right? There's a lot of shipping that takes place, and that's why it developed there. But we also have people. This is a vision of eastern end of Galveston, people who live near the coast. We also have other infrastructure. We've got homes on the coast. And so I guess a philosophical question when we talk about storm surge protection is, what are we trying to protect? Are we trying to protect our most vulnerable infrastructure, our economic drivers for the region? Are we trying to protect our houses, our homes? Are we trying to protect it all? And I think that question is relevant because there are cost levels associated with doing everything. Essentially, the more we protect, the more expensive it gets, and we have to be cognizant of the cost levels and be realistic about what we can truly afford to protect. You love this pointer. It goes backwards. Intuitively, it goes backwards. Okay, so just generally concepts. What are we talking about? One of the main concepts that we're concerned with as the Galveston Bay Foundation is this, the floodgate between Galveston Island and Bolivar Roads. So if you're a sailor, if you're a fisherman, if you spend any time around Galveston Bay, it's a pretty large distance between Galveston Island and Bolivar Roads. It's almost 2 miles. And so in order to stop the storm surge from coming from the Gulf of Mexico into Galveston Bay, one of the main components is to build a giant floodgate across that 2-mile wide pass. That's the pass where all of our shipping comes in and out of the Gulf of Mexico. That's a pass where the majority of our inflow and outflow from the bay comes in and out. And so there's some concept to create a permanent structure across there with an opening for ships that would then close. All this would close only when a storm surge is coming, but there would be permanent infrastructure in place that could restrict flow coming in and out of the bay. And that would be our biggest concern, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. In my mind, the good news is there's lots of really smart people thinking about this stuff. There's one concept called the Ike Type, but there's other folks putting forward other options. You're going to hear from Jim Blackburn, so I won't really talk too much about this, but there's a lot of components of an overall storm surge protection. It's not just one thing, there's multiple options. The speed center, again, I think Jim is probably going to talk about this, so I won't talk about the concept of a mid-bay gate rather than a lower bay gate. There's the Gulf Coast Community Protection and Recovery District, which is a locally funded organization which Colonel Solis has led, and they've come up with some recommendations. This is very similar to the Ike Dike, which would be extending the seawall in some form or fashion across Galveston Island, creating that same type of structure across Bolivar Pass or Bolivar Peninsula, and then creating a gate in between the two. We've got the Corps of Engineers working on this effort. There's a 5.5-year long study underway as we speak. And I know Colonel Waterworth is going to come up here and talk about how the core process is broken, and you could certainly have a whole conversation about that. But when you want to spend 12 billion, 15 billion in federal dollars, there are some procedures you have to jump through. And perhaps we could maybe accelerate this, we could fund this in a greater fashion, but right now there's a lot of things that are going on through the core process, which the State General Land Office is the local sponsor of. So they're looking at different alternatives. You know, the kind of traditional federal environmental law review is to look at alternatives, look at the costs, look at the benefits, and finally come to a decision on what they might recommend for funding, and then seek that funding. And so there's alternatives with a ring levee around Galveston, a dike across or a floodgate across Bolivar Peninsula, Bolivar Roads. Another alternative is to have sort of another type of floodgate structure that would tie into the Texas City dike. The third alternative would be something bay that would be similar to what Jim Blackburn and the Speed Center have been looking at. And then a fourth alternative harkens back to what was originally known as the Centennial Gate, doing something on 146, stopping the storm surge from getting up into the upper ship channel. So as the Galveston Bay Foundation, our mission is about preserving and protecting the Galveston Bay. We certainly are, you know, we live here too. This is not, we're not doing this in a vacuum. Our office is literally a mile as the crow flies from here. We have people who live in Galveston, we have people who live in the Bay Area, we have people who live up in Houston, so we're not insensitive to people's needs, but our mission is focused on the Bay. And so when you're talking about building a structure that will literally permanently change the Bay forever, we want it to be examined. We want it to be looked at. We want it to be understood ahead of time before we build something to understand what those impacts will be. And our biggest concerns from a Bay perspective are impacts to habitat and Bay species, including the water column. I'm going to show you a slide on that. And then, of course, changes to Bay circulation and salinity, because these will have long-lasting, forever impacts. Again, just kind of an aerial photo of that flood structure in the Netherlands with a simple incoming tide, and you can see how it has changed the tide coming in and out of the bay. So here's what we got here in Galveston Bay. We have two main passes. We have the Bolivar Roads, which is the one between Galveston and Bolivar Peninsula, and of course San Luis Pass, and that's the vast majority of the water. We also have Rollover Pass, which is a man-made pass, which its feature may or may not continue to exist as a pass, but it really is a small portion of the water that comes in and out. So I was pleased that George was going to be here. George is a fisheries biologist. He certainly understands this, but a lot of our species in Galveston Bay, fish, shrimp, crabs, they migrate in and out from the Gulf of Mexico. It's really important. Forget the details of this, but essentially the adult species head out into the Gulf, they lay eggs, they grow into larval and post-larval, they float back into the bay, and then they grow into juvenile, and they start the trek all over again. And so there's a constant inflow and flow of water out of Galveston Bay with critters. I have 1 minute left, so I better talk fast. But it's really important to allow that access from Gulf of Mexico into Galveston Bay. And so we're talking about creating this structure across the mouth of our biggest pass. What will that possibly do to water coming in and out of Galveston Bay? So we've seen studies of impacts in the Netherlands on the eastern shed. And so we know from studying this that the tidal range coming in and out of the pass has decreased. We know that the tidal prism, the amount of water, when you constrict a narrow pass, less water is going to get in and out. That has happened. The intertidal area, which is basically the water coming in and out, has decreased by 30%. They've seen salt marsh decrease, and they've just had a lot of impacts from these structures. And so we continue to look to the Netherlands to help us find solutions, but I think we absolutely, and I think everybody in this room would say, we need to learn from the Netherlands as well. So there was a graduate student who just did a very simple study in my mind about the impacts of the Ike Dike on Galveston Bay. These same things were areas of concern. Reduction in flow area at Bolivar Roads, in and out of the bay, reduction in the volume. The other things that will happen is it's sort of like a garden hose. When you constrict a garden hose, less water gets in, but it also starts flowing faster and stronger. And so the ship channel through Muller Roads is already about 60 feet deep because there is a hugely strong current already. And so what happens if you restrict that? That current starts to flow even faster and potentially scours out even more. It also decreases the speed of the bay flowing out of Galveston Bay, right? So all the water in Galveston Bay ultimately flips over. Turns out it flows out through the Gulf of Mexico. And so when you put something that restricts that, it slows it down. You can understand how the water flow would slow down. And a worry there is that sedimentation happens in a faster way. So we've got this Houston Ship Channel, which is already consistently needing to be dredged because it keeps filling back up. When you slow the water down, it could have impacts there. Again, just potential impacts, blocking of sediment. Just again, when you create a huge structure like this, there will be impacts. And I think our position on this ultimately is let's make sure we study it, let's make sure we understand it, let's make sure we fully evaluate those impacts. And I think that's our position as the Galveston Bay Foundation. Let's continue to have this discussion. Let's move forward if this is what the community really wants, but let's also fully understand the impacts. We think we can help make decisions on how this thing is designed if we move forward with it. Certainly, it's fiscally responsible to understand those impacts ahead of time, not build it and understand those impacts later. We've consistently heard, and I mentioned this already, that we're going to learn from the Dutch, so let's really learn from the Dutch. And then where we have impacts, if we do go forward with this thing, we need to mitigate those impacts. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. You're going to hear from Brandt and Jim, probably have some similar things to say, but thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Brandt Mannchen, and he'll be his speech, his presentation is potential environmental impacts of the Coastal Barrier Project.
Thank you, George. My name is Brandt Mannchen, and I represent the Houston Sierra Club. I'm a volunteer. And what I'd like to talk about tonight is something that is rarely talked about, which is the environmental impacts of coastal barriers. And coastal barriers are what you normally have heard are the Ike Dike or central spine or coastal spine or whatever name you want to give it. Also, a mid-bay alternative by the Speed Center is also a type of barrier. But what I'd first like to do is talk about several really important features, geologic features. This is Bolivar Peninsula, which is a barrier peninsula. This is Galveston Island, and this is Follett's Island, and they're both barrier islands. And the reason these barrier islands and peninsulas are so important is because they're our first line of defense against storm surge. If in any way human activities reduce the ability of these geological structures to function and to function in a healthy manner, we're in more trouble. And that's already happening. Right here on Galveston Island, you know about the seawall. Seawall was built, I think, in 1914 or somewhere around there. And one of the problems we have with the seawall, and which we could have with a coastal barrier, is the beach disappears, the natural beach. And the reason it disappears is because as hurricanes and other storms slam up against the seawall or a big levee structure, that energy has to go somewhere. And where that energy goes is it takes some of the sand and sediment and takes it in the longshore current and takes it out of the system and on down the coast. We're talking about structures that are 17 to 21 feet tall, 55 miles long, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 360 to 420 feet wide. These are extremely large structures. In addition, next slide, I have three. This is one particular Kim's Ridley sea turtle, which is a federally endangered species. And this shows you that in addition to nesting activities that sea turtles have, they also use Galveston Bay and the coastal area along the shorelines of Galveston Island and Bolivar Peninsula. One of the things, when you lose the beach, you lose these nesting areas. In addition to losing the beach, you potentially lose the other habitats that are behind the beach, which includes the dunes, coastal prairie, and freshwater wetlands. So these large structures have potential environmental impacts, and they're long-term environmental impacts. They may not happen the first year, they may not happen the first 5 years, but over decades, the beaches and these other habitats disappear. To keep these geological structures healthy, they move. They move because sea level rises. And right now, sea level is rising quicker than it has in quite a long time, and the projections are for it to continue to rise quick. So what these structures do during hurricanes is they push sand from the beach and from just offshore of the beach and from the sand dunes, push it over on the bayside. That's why you have bayside wetlands on Bolivar Peninsula and Galveston Island, and that essentially helps move the island upslope toward the mainland and keeps it above sea level. Problem with big levees and other structures is they try to pin down the island. They try to keep the island from moving. And the problem there is if you do that, then the island is not able to replenish itself and keep going upslope and stay above sea level. So to keep the island healthy, you need to have those hurricanes push that sediment to the back to create marshes to keep that island moving above sea level. You also have wind-blown processes. Wind constantly is blowing sand from the beach and the dunes all across the island and the peninsula. A 17 to 21 foot structure is going to in some way affect some of that wind-blown process. You can easily see how the island is still moving, Galveston Island. So if you go to the end of the seawall and you look at where the shoreline it is inward of the existing sea wall. So west end of Galveston Island is still moving. The east end is kind of held in place by the seawall. In addition, along Bolivar Peninsula and Galveston Island, you have some of the most important protected public and private conservation and recreation lands that exist on the coast. These include Anahuac National Wildlife Refuge. They include about 3 Houston Audubon Society nature preserves. They include Galveston Island State Park. They include properties for Galveston Bay Foundation and also the Nature Conservancy, and also properties that the City of Galveston and Galveston County own. Building a levee that large is going to affect all of these properties and the ecological processes that keep those properties as conservation properties so that we have the wildlife, we have the marshes and the wetlands that they're there to protect and also provide habitat for various birds and sea turtles and other things. When you lose the beach, the answer is, of course, to re-nourish the beach. And one of the problems with re-nourishing the beach is, where do you get the sand from? And then how much does it cost, and what kind of environmental impacts are caused by taking that sand from wherever you get it. And remember, when this happens, it will be forever. If you want a beach on Galveston Island after you build the big levee system behind the beach and that beach erodes away, forever you're going to have to find sand supplies and pay the cost and put it down every 5, 7, 10 years, whatever the time period is. So we need to think about long-term maintenance costs and whether we have enough sand supplies to do this forever. Finally, what I want to say, since I about run out of time, is we need to have a long-term vision. The Corps of Engineers, you saw some of the proposed alternatives. They're only planning for a Category 3 hurricane for the next 50 years. We need to have a long-term vision where we're looking at least 100, maybe 200 years in the future and determining what's potentially going to happen and how we're going to deal with that and what the environmental impacts are. Thank you very much.
Okay, our next speaker is Colonel Lynn Waterworth, and I believe he has a video you were going to show?
We have a video.
Okay.
So let me just make a few remarks right
Go ahead.
It's been a long evening. We've been talking about what should happen. The question I want you to add into your equation is when should we do something? And I was thinking about the presentation so far this evening. Sounds to me like sort of like the Texas two-step. We have two big issues that are going on in our communities. You have 8 bayous that come in and we're subject to great rain events. There's 1,000 points of light, 1,000 solutions to try to solve that. Land use, buyouts. If I'm not mistaken, there's 150,000 homes and buildings still in the floodplain, in the flood zone. What are we going to do with those? But we have people working that. We have people from Texas A&M, the Harris County Flood Control District. Jim's working this hard. Rice is working this hard. That's the flooding problem. There are people working that. Did we do enough? Did we have enough money to do it? No. We could have done things better, and I think that's what part of this forum is about. But we have surge events. We're subjects to hurricanes. And there's lots of concerns here on the environment. Totally agree. How do we balance the environment, businesses, and people? And if we're going to come up with a solution, when are we going to do that? I mean, you were talking about, Lisa, you were talking about intensity of weather events. Ike happened in 2008, cost $30 billion. Category 2 storm with 4 surge. Cost $30 billion, and then we went through the longest hurricane drought. And guess what, folks? 2017, we had 3 Category 4s hit in the Gulf. Talk about Harvey. It was a rain event for us. 36 hours before it hit the Texas coastline, it was a tropical storm and then hit us as a Cat 4 hurricane. And we saw 3 of them. Sea level rises, water's getting warmer. Are we going to see more of that? So this is the question. When are we going to do something? Or should we do nothing at all? But I don't want anybody to walk away from this meeting tonight and go, I didn't know I was going to get hit by a hurricane. On an average, every 14 years, the 6 northern counties should see a Cat 3, 4, or 5. This 10 counties right around us has 6.5 million people in it. It has the largest petrochemical manufacturing complex in the United States, and it's growing. And we have Galveston Bay, and with the efforts of the Galveston Bay Foundation and Jim Blackburn, there's been a slight progression of getting better over time, and we need to keep that up. We don't want a project that hurts their environment or puts people at greater risk or dumps one of these 10,000 tanks into the Galveston Bay complex. Now, we at Texas A&M started out and said, how do we protect something? Dr. Merrill came up with the Ike Type. Defend well forward. I don't know who to leave on the wrong side of a surge suppression project. I'm not going to make that choice. So we came up with the Ike Type. Now, there's lots of discussions on what this thing is. And to sum this up, I'm going to show you a 7-minute movie. Please.
We're hearing that the hurricane has now strengthened into a Category 5 storm with sustained winds of 165 miles per hour. The latest information indicates that the storm will make landfall tonight at Galveston. The storm surge is predicted to be in excess of 30 feet. We have the latest image from the National Weather Service. You can see here the storm is covering most of the Gulf of Mexico and is bearing down on the Houston-Galveston area. Residents are advised to leave as soon as possible to avoid the wind and flooding associated with this monster storm.
Mom, are we gonna be okay?
We'll get through this, guys. We'll get through this, all right?
What was that?
What it was, I don't know. We gotta get out of here. We gotta get out of here. Now the water is rising and it's coming in the house. We gotta get to the attic. Come on, let's go.
This is a Weather Guide news break. Authorities say this was the most destructive storm to ever hit Texas. The president has declared a state of national emergency and has mobilized the National Guard. We have reports of massive flooding and hundreds of deaths along the upper coast.
The upper Texas coast has a long history of direct hits by major hurricanes. On September 8, 1900, a Category 4 storm raged through Galveston, killing an estimated 8,000 people. The Great Hurricane remains the deadliest hurricane disaster in U.S. history. In 1961, Hurricane Carla reached Category 5 status before pummeling the Texas coast with unbridled ferocity. Hurricane Alicia became the first billion-dollar storm in 1983 as it roared up I-45, destroying homes and blowing out windows in the towering skyscrapers of downtown Houston. In September 2005, Hurricane Rita ravaged the upper Texas coast, forcing 3.7 million panicked residents to flee their homes. 118 people died during the evacuation. In 2008, Hurricane Ike rocked Texas with a near direct hit on Galveston, sending a 10 to 15-foot storm surge onto the island and the western end of Galveston Bay.
For those of us living on the upper Texas coast, we see a major hurricane on average about once every 15 years. The problem is, in the lull between these big storms, we tend to forget how devastating they can be. We tend to think, well, we made it through the last one, why should I worry about the next one?
1 in 4 Texas residents lives along the Gulf Coast, yet most people do not realize the risks associated with living in the coastal region.
The biggest killer in a hurricane is the surge. Probably 3/4 of the total damages in a hurricane is due to storm surge.
The Tri-County area of Galveston, Harris, and Chambers counties is one of the most flood-prone regions of the United States. The Houston Ship Channel and the Port of Houston is home to the largest petrochemical complex in the United States, with nearly $500 billion in economic activity.
This region is responsible for 25 to 35% of the petrochemicals and the fuels that are used and consumed in the entire United States. A 27-foot storm surge that reached the upper reaches of the Houston Ship Channel would truly be devastating.
So what can be done to prevent such devastation and help prepare for and mitigate the flooding caused by storm surge in the Tri-County area? A group of scientists and researchers at Texas A&M University, Galveston, has developed a multi-pronged approach that will dramatically reduce the impact of major storms on the upper Texas Gulf Coast. One component is a coastal barrier, or spine, called the Ike Dike, that when completed, would protect the Houston-Galveston area.
The idea is very simple. You stop the surge at the coast. You don't let it get in the inland waters.
Well, the coastal spine is an extension of the seawall, built in the early 1900s. It will extend along the coast with a hard structure, but covered with sand and seagrass, so you won't even know that there's a coastal barrier there. You'll also have gates along the Bolivar Roads area, which is the navigation channel. That'll help keep surge water out of the bay during times of hurricanes.
This coastal barrier is based on technology implemented in the Netherlands to prevent repeated, devastating storm surge from the North Sea.
They have big gates that protect them. They have barriers that protect them. They put it together. They have a coastal spine, just like we want here. They close those gates and use that barrier 26 times, and it's worked every time.
When completed, the Ike Dike and coastal spine will protect the upper Texas coast from the catastrophic destruction of hurricane storm surge. Another major component developed at Texas A&M University is a remarkable tool available to anyone with an internet connection. In 1993, the Texas legislature created the Center for Texas Beaches and Shores to address beach erosion and wetlands loss throughout the state. Dr. Sam Brody is the director of the center.
One of our major initiatives is the development and creation of the Texas Coastal Atlas. This is a web-based interactive system that helps homeowners, residents, and other coastal stakeholders understand the impacts of storm surge and flooding on property along the coast.
Dr. Brody's team wrote a software package that models the effects of different storm-related factors along the unprotected coastal regions. By clicking on a menu, users can select from more than 150 different filters or layers, ranging from flood damage to elevation to estimated losses within a region, a neighborhood, or an individual home or property. Because the Atlas accumulates data from multiple sources, homeowners, businesses, and developers can toggle specific layers on and off within the Atlas to view relevant information about a specific location or area of interest.
The main purpose of the Atlas is to study what the impacts of storm surge might be in the Tri-County region. A user can zoom in on a specific area, take it on down further to a plot of land. On that individual plot, they can look at the actual structure that's on the plot.
Coastal residents can enter the address of their home, select different layers, and instantly see what would happen to their homes during each scenario. Families interested in the purchase of a new or existing home can learn about the location of a house or property and the quantifiable damage it may face. Business owners or developers can research the threat to a current or potential new location and understand the consequences of developing a specific parcel before a shovel ever hits the ground. The Atlas also incorporates a vertical slider bar that can be moved across the screen. By manipulating the slider function, residents and business owners can see the drastic reduction in flood damage if the Ike Dike and coastal spine were in place.
We can mitigate storm surge. We can't do anything about the wind and the rainfall, but we can certainly mitigate storm surge. The Ike Dike is designed to do that.
Once the Ike Dike is built, will protect people, property, and the economy along the Texas coastline.
It can protect not just the regional economy and not just the national economy, but the world economy.
Hurricanes can be devastating to communities and life-changing events for individuals. We need our citizens to contact their congressmen and their senators and say, we need you to protect our communities. We need you to protect our lives. We need you to protect our jobs and the economy. We need you to...
So we've done things to protect from flooding. We have organizations, we have representatives, we have people working right now trying to make sure that freshwater flooding is, we do something about it. We've not done anything about surge protection. So should we protect people? Should we protect our environment? Should we protect our business? Is it worth doing? And when are we going to do that? Because we'll see a hurricane hit us. You will see a hurricane hit us. Price tag, about $6 to $7 billion. right in front of the Houston-Galveston area. Ike cost $30 billion. Is it worth it?
I'll take that. Okay, our final speaker is Mr. Jim Blackburn, who is with Rice University, the SS Speed Center, co-director, and his presentation is entitled, Let's Talk About Flooding in the Bay Area. Jim?
Okay, thanks, George. How many of you remember seeing this sign up in the Bay Area? You know why it was taken down? It was complaints, because it made it very hard to sell houses. Now, I think that tells us a whole lot. I think we're more worried about selling houses than we are protecting people. I think we are more worried about the way things appear than what we're actually doing. I think we do a lot of talking and not much action. So I think if we are really faced with a reality check of kind of where we are and what we're about. Now, Harvey was a record-breaking storm. This image from the Houston Chronicle basically shows the area with 40-plus inches of rain. But how many of you saw the weather forecast before Harvey came ashore down at Port Aransas in Rockport that said that there was going to be 40 inches of rain in the Houston area? How many of you remember hearing that? Yeah. How many of you believed it? A few of you did. You know? The point I want to make, though, is that before Harvey, if we had modeled at Speed Center a storm that was a Category 4, came ashore, stopped, backed up, came around as a tropical storm, and dropped 40 inches of rain over that area, everybody would have said we're fearmongers and we're crazy. But it happened. We are looking at a new normal. There's a study I'm still trying to understand that's by a bunch of expert climate modelers that are basically saying that what we used to consider a 500-year storm may actually be a 5-year storm now. Now, that's a sobering thought. If they are right, we are looking at a whole new reality about what the risk of flooding is here on the Texas coast. Now, I want us to talk about for a minute the fact that there's a group being formed called the Bayou City Initiative, and the whole goal of this group is to get on top of this flooding issue and to put pressure on the political establishment to get good information out and to actually have a citizen-led conversation about these issues. I think for too long we've depended on government to lead our conversation, and I think the citizens need to get much more involved in being straightforward about it. So keep in mind the Bayou City Initiative. You'll hear a lot more about it. I would also like to say that there's 2 papers that I've authored that the Baker Institute's put forward. You can go to the Baker Institute website and get it. And that offers a lot of specific suggestions. But today I'm going to pretty much talk about a vision, and I'm going to talk about a few ideas about down here to help the Bay Area. I think the vision for the future of this region is to have a group of citizens that are actually really smart about flooding issues and are engaged. I think we've got to make room for our bayous and creeks. I think we're going to have to see a lot of buyouts, which we haven't been willing to talk about. We're not talking about buyouts on the coast particularly. I think that that's a mistake because I think it ought to be part of what the discussion is. I think we need structures. They need to be cost effective. We need flood literate politicians, and we need to focus on the people that are here now versus those that we think are coming. I think we have so often focused on trying to make sure we had everything ready for the new people coming, that we have not protected the people that are here. And I think that's a misplaced priority that needs to be corrected in the community. And most of all, we need transparency about all of this. And I think that may be the most difficult thing to come by. Now, Harvey also led to a record-breaking ask for funding. The governor's office asked for $60 billion plus in federal funding to be made available. Now, what that tells me is there's going to be intense competition for money because of Harvey. Whatever money supply was out there diminished proportionately with Harvey. It's going to have to, more money is going to have, the same amount of money really is going to have to be spread around more areas. We're not going to get $60 billion. We're not going to get a half of that. I'd be surprised if we get a 25% to a third of it. I think we need to get realistic about what we can achieve and how we're going to achieve it. Now, this is what I have nightmares about. This is a hurricane, Ike plus 15%, strong category 3, weak 4, coming ashore down here at San Luis Pass, generating 20 feet of surge along the shoreline of the Gulf of Mexico, magnified up in the upper part of the bay to 25 feet. It basically will flood 7 refineries, about 100 chemical plants. It'll overtop the seawall in Galveston, which is at 17 feet. And so at 20 feet, the surge is going to be 3 feet over it, plus waves on top. Texas City levees overtopped. You've got flooding there. And you've got extensive flooding all back here through the Bay Area. Probably 200,000 houses impacted. And my estimate is if the evacuation isn't any better than it was for Ike, you could easily see the same number of people killed as were killed in Galveston. It's that serious. This is a nasty, nasty storm. And I believe, did your movie say 30 feet of surge? I think 27. 27, yeah, 30. Yeah, this one's 20 at the coast, not 30 at the coast. 30 at the coast is not unreasonable. I mean, if you put in sea level rise and some of the storms that are being projected out of the climate modeling, 30 feet at the coast, I think, is absolutely realistic in 50 years. So what are we building for? What storm are we looking at? I don't think we've begun to talk about the right storm, and I'm certainly not thinking that a 15 to 17 foot protection is anywhere close to being enough. Now, this is the mid-bay alternative. I wanted to just put it forward. I think that, frankly, it's still important that we have alternatives and we have different solutions. This solution is a $3 billion solution. It also includes a backside levee in Galveston and increasing the height there to 20 feet, having 25 feet along the ship channel here, basically an extension of the spoil disposal and the wetlands construction that we've been having there, and it connects across the Texas City levee with a gate structure at this location. It protects, I'd say 95% of the area that's protected by the Ike Dike for about, depends on if you believe 6 billion or 10 billion or 15 that Bob said, but it's significantly less. This proposal can be built with local funding. $3 billion is financeable with local bonds. And what I'm pushing for is that we need to go ahead and submit a permit application to get permission to build this. Doesn't cost a lot on the scale of billions of dollars. We're talking hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars for a permit application. Get it in. Get something permitted. Have an option that can be built locally. If we get $10 billion to build the Ike Dike, so be it. But we need to have alternatives. We have pieces that can be built right now. It does not have to all be a single project. We can begin to elevate 146. We can begin to elevate Highway 87 on Bolivar and 3005 on Galveston Island. It may not be exactly what's been thought about as the proposal, but these are things that can be done to begin to provide incremental protection, and if nothing else, give us good evacuation routes. And it might even look halfway decent if we were to do it. I think my point is simply this. I don't think that the public in this part of the world has been a full participant in these conversations. I think we've been content to let the government do the thinking for us, and I think that's got to change. This is not me with my Speed Center cap on, but this is me with my Bayou City Initiative cap on, simply saying, if we don't get out and take control of this issue, it's not going to get fixed. Thank you very much.
Okay, I've been informed that we need to only have 10 minutes, and then we will have to start moving out, and we have to be out here for sure by 10, so.
We have to be out of the room by 10 o'clock.
Out of the room by 10. So I'll go ahead and ask our panelists questions now. This one is, and anyone, of course, can chime in, but go ahead and start with Bob. Please address the moral hazard issues that might be associated with the Ike Dike and its progeny.
Let me guess who asked that question. Well, so I mean, I'm not going to give a strong opinion here, but I think what Dr. Jacob is referring to is the concept of building something that promises protection, and more people move to the coast, right? So the 30 billion that Colonel Waterworth talks about was not. It's not 30 billion from storm surge. There's a lot of wind and other damage that comes from a hurricane. So a storm surge gate is not going to stop that. If we have a category 3 or 4 or 5 hurricane that hits the coast and people have been lulled into a false sense of security that they're safe, we could theoretically have a lot more human damage. So, you know, I don't know how you get, these are not easy public policy issues, not at all. And so I'm not suggesting an answer one way or the other in terms of moral hazards, but I think you have to be cognizant of the fact that if you promise people they're safe and a levee fails, we're in big trouble. So, you know, can you make a levee that's foolproof? I don't know. Colonel Waterworth, you know, I think the floodgate structure that they're proposing for Galveston Bay is bigger than anything in the world. Like the ones they show in the Netherlands are like upriver systems, or they're smaller. So we're going to be cutting edge engineering to construct something like that in Galveston Bay that works. Can we do it? I'm not an engineer, but we've got really smart ones in the room. I think they probably can, but you know, it's not going to be cheap.
I am an engineer, so yes, we can. But let me address the moral. Let me address the moral because that's the question. Yeah. So the question is, if you build something and people believe they're protected, is that a moral hazard? Let me ask it differently. We have 6.5 million people in the area. We're going to add the size of Austin to the region. Is it a moral hazard to let people stay here and not do anything, knowing that we have hurricane coming? Should we be doing something? Isn't that the moral? Or should we be telling every one of you to move, to get out because there is a hurricane danger and we're not going to do it? So I think the moral hazard question, if I build something and give you a false illusion, but right now we're not even building it. So the question is that a moral hazard? I think it is. I think we should do something.
Well,
Stick with your questions.
Okay.
What are the probabilities of failure, and what would be the consequences of failure? And in other words, I don't hear that much. I'm not saying yes or no like that. It's just as part of the conversation.
I think that's a great part of the
So what is that? What, you know, and if it breaks, is it just a little trickle or is all hell?
Well, let me, those are some excellent questions, and that's actually the next one listed here, is what kind of redundancy is there in the big gates? Could the gates fail and not open to let out heavy rainwater flooding? And I'll let you continue.
The gates in the Netherlands. We need to be closer.
How about on? That's better, okay. Civil, I build gates, not electrical equipment. If you take a look at the Netherlands, 1958, they had a storm surge come in. They had flooding on the backside and storm surge in the North Sea. They decided to build a coastal spine effect. They put in gates. Those big white gates that you've seen out there on the film, they have the size of the Eiffel Tower laying on their side. They've been opened and closed 27 times. So out of all these years, they've exercised them or utilized them 27 different times, and they've not had a failure. But they're very meticulous at their operations and maintenance. You want a percentage? I can't give you a percentage. I can give you an example of a similar system that has worked since 1958, or that are around that time.
Can I ask the Colonel a question that doesn't require an opinion? What's the URL, or how do we find the model? The Atlas model.
Oh, the Atlas model? In fact, this is one of those tools. I think the whole idea of this conference is give you tools so that you can make informed decisions. If you go to Texas A&M Galveston, CTBS, Center for Texas Beaches and Shores, you can pull down the coastal atlas, and Dr. Brody is adding data to that all the time. These are multiple layers of GIS that you can go in and see all the data. All our research is going in there. We're expanding that to FEMA insurance. We're expanding that to freshwater flooding, so that you, as the public, can go in there and actually see what's going on. You can see damage to your house. You can see damage to the community. If you're an elected official, you can see if there's damage going to be your hospitals, your wastewater, your treatment. These are tools to help make a decision on where you want to live and the impact to your communities. Center for Texas Beaches and Shores.
Okay, next question, directed to Jim Blackburn. In regards to environmental impacts, what regulatory hurdles are required to be cleared before these major coastal structures can move forward?
There is a number of federal environmental statutes. I think that certainly with the permit application, you would have to go through full environmental review. With the Corps of Engineers process, under normal circumstances, you would have to go through full environmental review. There has been some talk about getting funding and circumventing initial environmental review and then doing backside review like was done on New Orleans. And frankly, I think that's a horrible idea. I think we ought to have a full vetting of these issues, or I think we're going to have a very strong opposition and rebellion within the community over that. But this is the discussion that's occurring. And when I talk about transparency, this is one of the transparency issues that I think is really important, is to have these discussions and have these, I think it ought to be a community decision whether or not we know the impacts to Galveston Bay before we make a commitment to build something.
Okay, one last question. This Brandt or Bob, have the people who are proposing to build and talking about the various options and the billions that will be spent per hurricane looked at any economic studies that quantify how much revenue our ecosystem provides for us all?
Currently, the Army Corps of Engineers is conducting a feasibility study and an environmental impact statement. The draft will come out in May of 2018. It's unclear at this time whether those ecosystem services will be fully calculated. That has been raised as an issue.
It's a good issue. The literature is out there to do it. It's just I've never really seen it done in an environmental impact statement.
One thing that people could do is, it's not too late to write the Corps of Engineers in Galveston and say you would like those kinds of calculations conducted so that the public can better weigh what the environmental impacts are economically. And I just want to also mention, back on the table, we've got a paper, and if we're out of the paper, let me know and give me your email and I'll send it to you. And it sort of gives a Sierra Club perspective on an alternative that is different than perhaps the Mid-Bay or the Ike Type alternative, and might provide some more thoughts about, looking at certain areas and how you would approach trying to address storm surge in each of the different areas of the different parts of the bay.
Thank you. Bob, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just one kind of closing issue. I mean, I think fundamentally, there's a lot of major issues here, but maybe it all comes down to money as well, right? So we're talking about billions of dollars, acquiring billions of dollars. And our position at GBF has been we need different alternatives at different price points, a little bit like what Jim was talking about, because if we're putting all our eggs in the 15 billion or 12 billion or whatever basket, and we never get that money, nothing ever gets built, right? So let's look at some smaller alternatives. Just for context, and I'm not a politician, but Governor Abbott asked for $60 billion in hurricane relief in the latest ask, 12 billion of which was going to be allocated to the coastal storm surge, right? So that's a lot of money. The administration came back with, I think the number was 44 billion, not for Texas, for 3 states. For Texas, Florida, and Puerto Rico. And so realistically, I'm not a politician, but how could we get to $12 billion? Is that realistic? And so, and then beyond the capital costs, and there could be some very good cost-benefit analysis that say we should do this, right? I'm not going to dispute that. But how do we get that money? And then how do we generate the operating and maintenance dollars that are required once you build a big structure like that? They talk about something like 0.5%. And so I ran some numbers on 15 billion, and if it's less than 15, obviously these numbers are less, but that would require $75 million annually to operate and maintain it. And I'm not an expert, so Colonel Solis and Colonel Waterworth could say those numbers are inflated, but the fact of the matter is we would need to generate long-term tax dollars locally to make that happen. So that's where I think the hard part of all of this is. We can design it, we can study it, we can get answers, but funding it is a whole different thing.
Thank you, Bob. And with that, we're going to have to close the session. I'd like to thank the speakers for all the information they shared. I apologize for us running a little bit late, but I think most of us will agree that we've learned a lot tonight. I'd also like to thank JSC Safety and Mission Assurance Directorate, specifically Gail Scoron and Cheryl Butler for their help tonight. And everyone have a nice evening and be safe on your drive home. Thank you.